Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The docking concourse of Orion Spaceport was a river of voices, neon signs, and bootsteps. Its vaulted ceilings disappeared into industrial haze, where maintenance drones darted like metallic insects between exposed conduits and cooling vents. Beneath them, thousands moved in currents. Merchants with hover carts, refugees with bundles, uniformed personnel with straight backs and clear paths before them. Through it all stumbled a blind girl, fingers brushing the railing, her crude cane a rusted pipe. The metal was pitted with corrosion, wrapped at one end with frayed insulation tape that left black residue on her palm. She couldn't have been more than 12, her thin frame swimming in a patchwork coat several sizes too large. Dark glasses concealed her eyes but couldn't hide the tension in her jaw as she navigated the chaos by sound and touch. A voice cut through the crowd, then another. Laughter, sharp and targeted. Look at that. Station rats get bolder every cycle. 4 cadets in spotless uniforms materialize from the flow of bodies. Their insignias mark them as first-year academy recruits, still soft but already learning the language of power. They circled, creating a pocket of empty space around the girl. Her head tilted, tracking their movements as her knuckles whitened around her makeshift cane. She could hear everything. The synthetic swish of their regulation boots against the polished floor, the subtle difference between the heavy tread of the tallest one and the lighter steps of the others. The girl's ears caught the rustle of starched collars, the jingling of identification tags, the soft hiss of breath before mockery. This section is restricted, the tallest cadet said, voice pitched to Carrie. How'd you even get past the checkpoints, rat? The girl didn't answer. She adjusted her course, trying to edge past the wall they'd formed. Her free hand extended slightly outward, fingertips sensing the subtle changes in air currents as bodies shifted around her. Hey, I'm talking to you. The cadet stepped directly in her path. Her cane tapped against his boot. The sound changed, harder, more hollow than the floor. She recognized the distinct echo of standard-issue officer footwear, the kind with reinforced toes designed to last through long patrols. The concourse continued flowing around them. No one slowed. No one looked. Conversations flowed uninterrupted, a river of indifference surrounding the small island of cruelty forming around her. That's how they get in, said another cadet, this one with a shaved head that gleamed under the harsh lights. The girl could hear the way his voice bounced differently, no hair to absorb the sound waves. They fake disabilities. Probably can see just fine. The girl stiffened. Her world had been darkness for 3 years, but her hearing had sharpened to compensate. She could hear the scorn dripping from each syllable, could feel their stares like physical weight on her skin. Please, I just need to... Take those glasses off, the tall one demanded. She retreated a step, her cane sweeping frantically to ensure clear space behind her. The familiar texture of the floor beneath the pipe's end was her only anchor in a suddenly hostile environment. No! His hand shot out, fingers closing around the frame of her dark glasses. She twisted away, but he yanked them free. The rush of recycled air against her exposed eyes burned like salt on an open wound. The girl's face jerked up reflexively, revealing eyes clouded with milky cataracts. The skin around them was scarred tissue, puckered and pale. She heard their intake of breath, the subtle shift of their postures that she had learned to interpret as disgust. Her world remained the same, endless darkness, but now they could see what she lived with. The cadet hesitated, something like shame crossing his face before hardening into disgust. Shit, put them back on. He tossed the glasses and they clattered to the floor several feet away. The sound of plastic skittering across polished metal sent her heart racing. Without those glasses, she felt naked, exposed. They weren't just protection from curious stares. They were armor. The girl dropped to her knees, fingers sweeping the polished floor in desperate arcs. The cold metal surface offered no texture to guide her, no clues to where her glasses had landed. Her fingertips brushed against nothing but smooth emptiness, again and again. Panic rose in her throat. Please, she whispered, continuing her futile search. I can't... A heel came down. Crack. Her cane splintered in two beneath the cadet's boot. The sound was like a gunshot to her sensitive hearing, the vibration traveling up her arm as her last lifeline was severed. The sudden absence of support sent her toppling forward, hands splayed to break her fall. Her palms slapped against the hard floor, skin stinging from the impact. Restricted areas are restricted, he said flatly. Then with casual cruelty, he added, you don't even have a family to stand up for you. No one cares if you're here or not. She heard them walk away, their voices already turning to lighter topics, meal rotations and duty assignments, weekend passes and training scores. Their laughter faded into the general din of the concourse, leaving her alone in her darkness. The girl remained kneeling, one hand still searching for her glasses, the other clutching half of her broken cane. Her fingers trembled as they moved in wider circles, desperate to find the one thing that would shield her eyes from a world that didn't want to see them. Without the cane's support, she swayed slightly, disoriented in the sea of noise. Each passing footstep sent vibrations through the floor, people moving around her, avoiding her like an inconvenient obstacle, none slowing to help. At last, her fingertips brushed against the familiar shape of her glasses. Relief washed through her as she grasped them, checking by touch for any cracks or damage. Finding none, she placed them carefully back over her eyes, the familiar weight settling on her nose and ears like a shield being restored. Then she tried to stand, hands clawing at empty air for balance. Without her cane, the world expanded into a terrifying void. Her legs buckled beneath her, muscles tensing against a fall she couldn't see coming. She fell again, harder this time, landing on her hip with enough force to steal her breath. A small sound of pain escaped her lips, but it was swallowed by the station's constant noise. No one stopped. One fragment of her cane rolled across the floor, spinning lazily until it struck a man's boot. He stood still while others flowed around him, watching the girl struggle. His hands were work-roughened, nails rimmed with grease that no amount of scrubbing seemed to remove. Years of maintenance work had left a network of small scars across his knuckles, burn marks from soldering tools, chemical stains from industrial lubricants, fine white lines where sharp metal had caught his skin. The patch on his faded coveralls read, Maintenance Division 7, but the number had been deliberately obscured with black marker. A tool satchel hung at his hip, heavy with metal implements. The man, Caleb Vance, knelt and lifted the shard of rusted pipe. He turned it over in his hands, feeling the corrosion bite into his calloused fingertips. His gaze moved between the broken fragment and the girl still attempting to rise on trembling legs. His weathered face, all angles and shadows beneath 3 days of stubble, revealed nothing as he weighed the decision forming in his mind. The crowd continued to part around him, some giving irritated glances at the obstacle in their path. A station security drone floated overhead, its sensors sweeping methodically across the concourse, watching, recording, enforcing. Discovery of his altered division marker alone would mean disciplinary action. Involvement with an unauthorized civilian could mean worse. Caleb's jaw tightened as he made his choice. He reached into his satchel, pushing aside worn tools and salvaged components until his fingers found what he sought. From the depths of the bag, he pulled a polished length of alloy tubing. It caught the harsh overhead lights, gleaming with the unmistakable luster of high-grade station materials. Expensive, precisely machined, and definitely not authorized for personal use. It was a specialized tool component he'd been saving for a critical repair, its smooth surface unmarred by use or time. He held it for a moment, feeling its perfect weight and balance. The contrast between his oil-stained hands and the pristine metal was stark, like holding a piece of the privileged upper decks in the grip of the maintenance tunnels. The girl was still struggling, her hands finding nothing but empty air as she tried to steady herself. Her face was turned downward, lips pressed together in determined concentration, but her shoulders had begun to slump with the inevitability of defeat. Caleb crossed the short distance between them, his steps deliberate. The station security cameras would have them both in frame now, the maintenance worker and the unauthorized blind girl. No turning back. He crouched beside her, close enough that she tensed at his presence, her head tilting to track the sound of his breathing. Her fingers curled protectively around the broken half of her makeshift cane, ready to use it as a weapon if needed. She flinched at his approach, tensing for another blow, another cruelty. The reaction was instinctive, the learned response of someone who had experienced the station's indifference too many times. Slowly, telegraphing his movements though she couldn't see them, Caleb pressed the alloy tube into her trembling hand. For a moment, confusion flickered across her face as her fingers closed reflexively around the smooth metal. Uncertainty gave way to disbelief as her thumb ran along its surface, tracing the perfect cylindrical form, feeling its solid weight. Her exploration became more urgent as she realized what he'd given her. Not just metal, but possibility. Her fingertips discovered every millimeter of the tube, measuring its length, testing its strength. Hope dawned gradually on her face, like someone afraid to believe in sudden good fortune. The tube was the perfect length for a cane, lightweight yet strong enough to bear weight. Her grip tightened around it as she pulled herself upright, testing its support against the floor. The soft tap it made against the polished surface was crisp and clear, so different from the dull clunk of her rusted pipe. She stood fully for the first time since her fall, her balance restored by this unexpected gift. Her breath escaped in a soft sigh of relief as the cane took her weight, becoming an extension of herself, reconnecting her to the geography of the world around her. "Thank you," she whispered, the words nearly lost in the concourse's din. Her voice carried the wonder of someone who had grown accustomed to the absence of kindness. Caleb nodded, though she couldn't see it. "It'll hold," he said simply, watching as she tested the cane with another careful tap. Then, his voice lower, he added, "No father should have left you walking with scrap like that." She lifted her sightless eyes toward him, a hesitant smile forming, the first genuine expression to cross her face since he'd noticed her. The transformation was subtle but profound, like watching a wilted plant respond to water. Before either could speak again, a loudspeaker blared overhead, its mechanical voice echoing through the vast space. "Warning! Sector C will sterilize in 20 minutes. All unauthorized citizens evacuate immediately. This is not a drill." The girl's smile vanished. "Sterilize?" "Decontamination protocol," Caleb explained, something tight entering his voice. "They seal the sector and flood it with disinfectant gas. Burns the lungs if you're caught in it." 20 minutes, she repeated. Her knuckles whitened around her new cane. "How far do you need to go?" Caleb asked. The girl hesitated, weighing her answer. "The Refugee Processing Center. They said I could apply for temporary housing." Caleb's expression darkened. "That's in Sector E. You'd never make it across the checkpoints in time." "I have to try," she insisted. "I can't stay another night in the vents." The PA system crackled again. 19 minutes until sterilization. Security sweeps commencing. Caleb glanced at the nearest exit, where uniformed officers were beginning to appear, scanning identification chips embedded in the wrists of passing travelers. His jaw tightened. The choice before him was simple: walk away or get involved. Walking away was safer, smarter. "What's your name?" he asked instead. The girl tilted her head, surprised by the question. "Mira," she answered cautiously. "Mira," he repeated, committing it to memory. "I'm Caleb. Look, I know a maintenance corridor. It bypasses the checkpoints." Hope and suspicion ward on her face. "Why would you help me?" A valid question, one he didn't fully know the answer to himself. "Because I can," he said finally. "Come on, time's running." He moved to guide her, then caught himself and instead said, "2 steps forward, then right." Mira nodded and followed his directions, her new cane tapping a rhythm on the floor. They merged back into the stream of bodies, Caleb adjusting his pace to match hers, creating a small bubble of protection as they navigated toward the edge of the concourse. Behind them, the announcement played again. "Warning, 18 minutes until sterilization." As they reached the service corridor entrance, a security camera above the door swiveled toward them, its lens narrowing. A red light blinked twice, then held steady. They'd been tagged for tracking. The countdown had already begun. The system now recognized them as linked entities. Pursuits, penalties, consequences. What awaited one would await the other. Their fates were now entwined in the station's unforgiving database. Caleb led Mira toward a service door half hidden behind a row of food dispensers. The machines hummed and clicked, dispensing synthetic protein bars to hurried travelers. The smell of artificial flavoring couldn't quite mask the industrial cleaning agents that permeated everything in the station. "Stop," Caleb murmured as they approached the door. His eyes scanned the corridor. "Security drone, 10 o'clock. They froze beside a dispenser, Caleb pretending to select a meal while Mira stood close, head bowed as if examining the options she couldn't see. The drone hovered 20 feet away, its optical sensors sweeping methodically across the thinning crowd. Most civilians were already heading for the exits, responding to the evacuation order. "It's moving on," Caleb said after a tense moment. 3 more steps to the door. small ledge at the bottom. Mira nodded, her face a mask of concentration as she followed his instructions. Caleb reached past her to tap a code into the panel beside the service door. The lock clicked, but a red light remained illuminated. "Damn," he muttered. "They've changed the sequence." "What does that mean?" Mira asked, tension evident in her rigid posture. Before he could answer, a new voice cut through the ambient noise. "Identification, please." Caleb turned slowly. Approaching them with measured steps was an officer of station security, her uniform a mirror of authority, her blue skin flawless beneath the harsh lighting. The insignia on her collar marked her as a lieutenant. A regulation rifle hung from a strap across her chest, not quite pointed at them, but ready. "Lieutenant?" Caleb acknowledged, straightening slightly but keeping his body between the officer and Mira. "Mechanic," she replied, her gaze taking in his coveralls. "The altered division number, the tool satchel. You're attempting to access a restricted service corridor during evacuation procedures. Explain." Caleb kept his voice neutral. "Taking a shortcut to Maintenance Bay 4, Lieutenant. Supervisor called in an emergency repair for the atmospheric regulators." The officer's eyes narrowed. "Identification," she repeated, extending a scanner toward him. Caleb reluctantly offered his wrist, where his chip was embedded beneath the skin. The scanner beeped, and the officer examined the display. "Caleb Vance," she read. "Division 7, Access Level 3. Her gaze shifted to the altered number on his coveralls, then back to his face. "Your current division assignment is listed as 5, not 7, and you have no active work orders in this sector." Caleb's expression didn't change. "Administrative error. Been waiting on HR to fix it for weeks." The officer, her name badge read Serenia, shifted her attention to Mira, who stood silently gripping her new cane. "And who is this?" Serenia asked, voice hardening. "My assistant," Caleb said quickly. "Apprentice program for displaced miners." Serenia's eyebrow ridge rose skeptically. "An apprentice program? For the blind?" "She has excellent hearing," Caleb replied. "Helps diagnose mechanical issues by sound patterns." The explanation was thin, and they all knew it. Serenia stepped closer to Mira, who instinctively backed against the wall. "Chip scan," Serenia ordered. Mira shook her head. "I don't have one. Every station resident has an identification chip." "I have no sponsor," Mira whispered, her voice small but steady. "No parents. They're gone." Understanding dawned on Serenia's face, followed immediately by the cold mask of protocol. "Step aside, mechanic," she said, gesturing with her rifle. "The child is a trespasser. She does not belong here." "She belongs where her feet can carry her," Caleb countered, not moving. "Even broken." Serenia's jaw tightened. "A blind orphan with no skills, no citizenship, and no future? You call that belonging?" She gestured at Mira, clutching the alloy cane. "Mercy breeds chaos. Rules exist for reasons, mechanic. The station cannot support every stowaway and refugee that slips through the cracks." "And cruelty," Caleb said, voice steady, "breeds nothing at all." The PA system blared again. 16 minutes until sterilization. "All personnel must clear Sector C immediately." Serenia's eyes hardened. "This isn't about cruelty. It's about order, about survival." She moved her rifle from passive to ready position. "Stand aside. I'll escort the miner to processing." "There's no time," Caleb insisted. "Processing is 3 sectors away. She'll never make it through the checkpoints before sterilization." "That's not my concern. It should be everyone's concern when a child might die." Their standoff stretched, neither yielding. Mira's knuckles had gone white around her cane, her breathing shallow. Before Serenia could reply, alarms shrieked throughout the concourse, different from the measured evacuation warnings. These were sharp, urgent. Emergency lights pulsed red along the floors and walls. Steel shutters rumbled down over exits. The main doors to the concourse sealed with pneumatic hisses. The floor lights turned blood red. "Containment protocol activated," an automated voice announced. "Biohazard detected in ventilation system. Sector C lockdown in effect." Serenia's demeanor changed instantly from enforcer to commander. She activated her risk communicator. "Lieutenant Serenia to control. Status report on Sector C lockdown." The response was garbled with static, but the words, "Son, system malfunction, possible sabotage," were clear enough. "Civilians in sector?" she demanded. "Evacuation incomplete. Estimate 37 still present." Serenia cursed under her breath, then addressed her communicator again. Deploy emergency response teams to all sealed exits. Priority extraction for remaining civilians. The reply was immediate. Negative, Lieutenant. Quarantine protocol is absolute. No exits will be unsealed until decontamination is complete. There are children in this sector, she argued. Protocol is absolute, the voice repeated. 15 minutes until sterilization. Serenia's communicator went silent. She looked at Caleb and Mira, calculation evident in her gaze. The service corridors, Caleb said urgently. They have separate ventilation systems. If we can reach the maintenance shaft in Section 12, we might bypass the lockdown. Serenia hesitated, duty warring with the reality before her. Those corridors will be the first to flood with sterilizing agent. They're designed to carry it through the sector. Not if we can reach the junction point first and seal the distribution vents manually. A distant explosion rocked the concourse. Screams erupted from the main hall as ceiling panels crashed down. You have 15 minutes to convince me your plan works, mechanic, Serenia said, her rifle still trained on them. After that, I follow protocol, with or without you. Their argument had seconds left to matter. The decision was made for them when a nearby ventilation duct exploded outward in a shower of metal fragments. Acrid smoke poured into the concourse as emergency lighting flickered. Move! Serenia ordered, grabbing Mira's arm and pulling her toward the service door. She pressed her security badge against the panel, overriding the lock. The door slid open, revealing a narrow utility corridor lit by strips of emergency lighting. Hurry, she urged as Caleb helped Mira through the doorway. The smoke was thickening, obscuring visibility as the station's damaged systems struggled to compensate. Serenia was the last through, sealing the door behind them as distant shouts and alarms filtered through the metal. The service corridor stretched before them, eerily quiet compared to the chaos they'd left behind. Which way to Section 12? Serenia asked, her rifle now held ready. Caleb pointed left. 300 meters, then down a level. Can you keep up? She asked Mira. The girl nodded, her face set with determination. I'll manage. Stay between us, Serenia instructed. Mechanic, you lead. I'll cover our backs. They moved swiftly down the corridor, Caleb setting a pace that Mira could maintain with her cane tapping the metal flooring. Serenia followed, constantly checking behind them, her training evident in every precise movement. Timer? Caleb called back. Serenia checked her wrist display. 14 minutes. The corridor bent sharply, then opened into a junction of multiple passages. Caleb hesitated, orienting himself. This way, he said, indicating the rightmost path. There should be a maintenance ladder at the end that leads down to Section 12. They had gone barely 20 meters when a surge of gas erupted from a ruptured vent overhead. The force of it knocked Mira against the wall, her cane clattering to the floor. Cover your mouth, Caleb shouted, pulling his collar up over his nose. The gas wasn't the sterilizing agent, not yet, but some kind of pressurized coolant, frigid and disorienting. Serenia lunged forward, dragging Mira away from the worst of the cloud. The systems are failing sequentially, she said through her makeshift mask. We need to move faster. As if in answer to her words, a secondary explosion rocked the corridor. Fire licked across the ceiling, igniting leaked hydraulic fluid. The flames raced toward them, hungrily consuming the oxygen. Serenia reacted instinctively, shoving Caleb and Mira behind a support column, heat searing her thigh as she dove after them. She staggered, a cry of pain escaping her discipline as her leg buckled beneath her. Lieutenant! Caleb caught her before she fell, lowering her against the column's base. Blood soaked her white trousers where a piece of shrapnel had torn through the fabric into flesh. The wound was deep, indigo blood pooling fast beneath her. Mira crawled closer, her hands finding Serenia's injured leg. How bad? She asked. Bad enough, Serenia answered through gritted teeth. Caleb was already binding the wound with torn fabric from his coveralls. His hands moved quickly, precisely, with the confidence of someone accustomed to emergency repairs, whether of machines or people. Pressure bandage, he muttered. Should slow the bleeding. You waste your cloth, Serenia hissed, pain making her voice sharp. The wound will incapacitate me regardless. Continue to Section 12. Complete the mission. The mission now includes all three of us, Caleb replied firmly, tightening the makeshift bandage. Blood immediately soaked through it, but the flow seemed to lessen. Mira had retrieved her cane and was now feeling along the wall. There's another passage here, she said. I can feel the air current. It's cooler. Caleb looked up. She's right. That might give us a safer route. Serenia attempted to stand using her rifle as support. Her face, normally stoic, contorted with pain. 13-minute, she managed. We need to move. Can you walk? Caleb asked. I can manage, she echoed Mira's earlier words, determination overriding agony. Mira crouched beside Serenia, offering half of a ration bar she had hidden in her pocket. For strength, she said simply. Caleb broke it, pressed a piece into Serenia's hand. The officer stared at the offering, conflict evident in her eyes. We share what we have, Caleb said quietly. That's how the lower decks survive. Serenia's jaw locked. On her world, to share bread was oath. To eat was to bind. Among her people, such an exchange created obligation, a cultural weight she had long ago set aside for duty. Yet here, injured and facing death with two strangers, the old ways reasserted themselves. She swallowed the ration, tasting obligation and connection on her tongue. 10 minutes, she said, accepting Caleb's help to stand. Let's go. Mira led them through the alternate passage, her cane finding obstacles before they stumbled. The girl moved with growing confidence, as if the emergency had awakened some dormant instinct for survival. Behind them the fire spread, consuming the corridor they'd abandoned. The station groaned around them, stress fractures appearing in walls never designed to withstand cascading system failures. Serenia limped steadily, one hand braced against the wall, the other still gripping her rifle. Blood trailed behind her, marking their path in drops of indigo against the metal floor. As they rounded a corner, they came upon an emergency storage unit. The door hung partially open, revealing shelves of supplies, ration packs, water containers, and medical kits. In here, Caleb said, guiding them inside. We can treat your wound properly and reorient. The small room offered a momentary haven from the chaos. Serenia sank to a bench, exhaling sharply as Caleb applied a proper medical dressing from one of the kits. Mira found another bench, her shoulders relaxing slightly in the relative quiet. The storage compartment was standard station issue, utilitarian metal walls, overhead lighting panels, and ventilation ducts. But to them, it felt like sanctuary. The constant alarms and announcements were muffled here, reduced to distant, dull warnings rather than immediate threats. Mira set her cane aside and ran her hands along the wall, fingers exploring the seams of the metal panels. The walls here are different, she observed. Thicker insulation. The station sounds further away. Caleb nodded as he finished securing Serenia's bandage. Storage units are built to protect supplies from environmental fluctuations, extra insulation, separate climate systems. It's quiet, Mira said, a note of wonder in her voice. A small, tentative laugh escaped her, the sound startling in its unexpected lightness. I can hear myself think. Serenia watched the blind girl's exploration, the rigid line of her shoulders softening fractionally. For the first time since they'd encountered her, the officer's face lost some of its severe professionalism. Not quite a smile, but the ghost of one touched her lips. How long have you been on the station? She asked Mira, her tone lacking its earlier interrogative edge. Mira tilted her head, considering whether to answer truthfully. 8 months, I think. It's hard to track time in the vents. 8 months, Serenia repeated, something like surprise in her voice. Without being caught. I'm good at not being seen, Mira replied with a hint of pride. And when people do see me, they usually look away quickly. Her hand unconsciously drifted toward her dark glasses. An uncomfortable silence followed, broken only by the distant hum of the station's systems. Caleb busied himself inventorying the supplies, setting aside items they might need for their continued journey. You hear the maintenance teams coming, he guessed, watching Mira. That's how you've stayed hidden. She nodded. They all sound different. Security patrols have a rhythm, always the same pace, same routes. Maintenance crews are less predictable, but they talk more. Drones are the hardest. They're getting quieter with each new model. You've survived on your own all this time, Serenia asked, professional assessment mixing with reluctant admiration. Not always alone, Mira said, her voice softening. There are others. We help each other when we can. Others? Serenia's professional interest sharpened. How many? Before Mira could answer, Caleb interjected. Let's focus on getting out of here first. Questions about the station's uncounted population can wait. Serenia looked like she might argue, but instead she nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. She tested her injured leg, wincing but satisfied that the proper bandaging had improved her mobility. "The pain is manageable," she reported. "We should continue soon." "Few more minutes," Caleb said. "Let's all catch our breath." The three of them sat in unexpected calm, this small pocket of peace amid the station's escalating crisis. Mira's fingers continued their exploration, mapping the room through touch, creating a geography only she could see. Her movements grew more relaxed, the perpetual vigilance easing from her small frame. "I like it here," she said softly. "It feels safe." The word hung in the air between them, a dangerous illusion in their current circumstances, yet powerful in its simplicity. Safety was a luxury none of them had truly experienced recently. Not Mira in her hunted existence, not Caleb navigating the precarious line between rules and survival, not even Serenia with all her authority and training. For a moment, they allowed themselves to believe in that illusion. Serenia's posture loosened, her hand no longer resting on her weapon. Caleb leaned against the wall, eyes closing briefly. Mira smiled, a real smile this time, not the cautious half-expression she'd shown before. After a moment of hesitation, she reached out, her small fingers finding Caleb's hand where it rested on the bench between them. She squeezed it once, a gesture of trust so unexpected that Caleb's eyes flew open in surprise. Her touch was light but deliberate, and she withdrew it just as quickly. But the connection had been made. A bridge formed across the darkness. The moment of peace shattered as the storage unit's lights suddenly flashed red. A siren wailed, and mechanical locks engaged on the door with an ominous click. "Contamination detected," announced a robotic voice. Quarantine protocol initiated. Vents in the ceiling slid open, and thin wisps of white vapor began to drift downward. "No!" Caleb lunged for the door, fingers desperately seeking the manual override. 8 minutes, Serenia reported, pushing herself upright despite her injury. "What's happening?" "The station's systems think we're infected," Caleb explained, his hands moving frantically over the control panel. "It's sealing us in for sterilization." Mira stood perfectly still, her face turned upward. "I can hear something in the walls," she said. "Like crawling." Caleb pressed his ear to the wall. The sterilization system, mechanical valves opening in sequence. His eyes met Serenia's, both recognizing the deadly implications. "We're in a dead end." A maintenance technician in a gray jumpsuit suddenly appeared at the small window in the door. His eyes widened as he saw them trapped inside. His face was youthful but weathered, with the characteristic pallor of someone who spent their life in artificial light. The patch on his uniform identified him as Maintenance Division 3, Environmental Systems. "Stand back!" he shouted, his voice muffled through the thick barrier. Caleb guided Mira away from the door, while Serenia struggled to her feet, weapon ready despite her injury. The technician's fingers flew across the external control panel, entering a complex sequence of commands. His expression was focused, intense, a sheen of sweat forming on his brow as he worked against the automated systems. Come on," he muttered, visible through the window. The door slid partially open, just enough for a person to squeeze through. White vapor began to escape through the gap, dissipating into the corridor beyond. "Go," he urged them, holding the door with one hand while continuing to input override codes with the other. "The system's locking down, section by section. You've got seconds." Caleb helped Mira through first, guiding her hands to the narrow opening. "Sideways," he instructed. "It's tight." She slipped through with the agility of someone accustomed to navigating difficult spaces, her cane followed by her slender form. Caleb turned to assist Serenia. The injured officer stumbled through the narrow opening, leaving a fresh smear of blue blood on the frame as her wounded legs scraped against it. The technician's face showed the strain of fighting against the automated system. The door mechanism groaned as it tried to close, fighting against his manual override. "It's resetting," he warned, sweat now streaming down his face. "I can't hold it much longer." The technician shoved a security pass into Caleb's hand. "East shaft. Level 4. It'll bypass the lockdowns." His eyes darted to Mira, who stood just beyond the doorway, her head tilted to listen. "The girl, get her out, please." Caleb reached back to pull the technician through, but the man shook his head. "Someone has to hold the override," he said, his finger pressed firmly on the manual control panel inside the room. "If I let go, it seals instantly." His gaze met Caleb's, resolute and certain. I've got no one waiting. She does. The door was already beginning to close again, fighting against the manual override. The technician's face was calm, resigned. Get them out, he shouted again. Caleb hesitated only a second, then nodded once. Acknowledgement, gratitude, farewell. What's your name? He asked quickly. Ellis, the man replied. Now go. Bereji Yeyo. The last words were in an old Earth language. Russian, perhaps? Take care of her. Caleb ducked through the narrowing gap just as the door slammed shut. Through the window, they saw the white vapor thickening around Ellis, who maintained his position at the controls. The sterilization gas swirled around him, growing denser by the second. Ellis raised his hand in a final salute, a small smile on his lips. Then the vapor engulfed him completely, his silhouette fading into white nothingness. We need to move, Serenia said, her voice rough. Don't waste his sacrifice. Mira clutched her cane tightly, its polished surface now smudged with grime and sweat. Who was he? Ellis, Caleb answered, the name sitting heavy on his tongue. Someone who remembered what mattered. He looked down at the security pass in his hand, then up at the directional markings on the wall. This way, east shaft. Mira reached for Caleb's arm, her small fingers gripping the fabric of his coverall with surprising strength. Her face, normally guarded, was suddenly fierce with emotion. You saved me, she said, voice low and intense. Now you're bound to my path. Her blind eyes seemed to stare through him, the force of her declaration hanging in the air between them. Our stories are braided now. Caleb had no answer for such a solemn pronouncement from one so young. He simply covered her hand with his, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forming between them. They moved with renewed urgency, the technician's fate adding weight to each second that passed. Serena's limp had worsened, but she refused to slow their pace, her face locked in a mask of determination. As they approached a junction, Caleb abruptly held up his hand for a halt. Drone patrol, he whispered, pointing to a hovering security unit approaching from an intersecting corridor. They pressed against the wall as the sounds of mechanical propulsion grew louder. Above them, drones swept beams of white light across the haze. One passed inches from Mira's face, its sensors scanning for life signs. Caleb shielded her with his body, muscles taut with the anticipation of discovery. His action was reflexive, protective, futile perhaps. The drones would detect their heat signatures regardless, but beautiful in its human instinct. The drone hovered, its optical array focusing on them. A mechanical voice emanated from its speaker. Unauthorized personnel detected. Identify immediately. Serena stepped forward, wincing as weight shifted to her injured leg. Lieutenant Serena, Security Division. Override code Theta 973. The drone processed this information, lights blinking on its chassis. Override rejected. Security protocols elevated to level Alpha. All personnel must return to designated evacuation points immediately. We're trying to reach an evacuation point, Caleb interjected. The primary routes are compromised. Return to designated evacuation points, the drone repeated. Its weapon system hummed to life, a stun module extending from its undercarriage. Non-compliance will result in enforcement action. Serena's gaze fell to the cane Mira clutched, its splint of polished alloy now wrapped in her blood-stained sash, where Caleb had used it to secure the bandage. The symbol was no longer the girl's alone. It had become theirs, a shared lifeline. Decision crystallized in Serena's mind. With a fluid motion belying her injury, she raised her rifle and fired. The drone exploded in a shower of sparks, its remains clattering to the floor. That will trigger an alert, she said tersely. We have minutes at most before they send a security team. Caleb was already consulting the station schematic on the security pass the technician had given them. Level 4 is 2 decks down. There's a maintenance shaft 30 meters ahead. 5 minutes, Serena reported, her voice flat. The countdown now felt like a physical presence, breathing down their necks. They moved as quickly as her injury would allow, each step a battle against time and pain. The corridor ahead was partially collapsed, forcing them to climb over fallen ceiling panels and exposed conduits. Almost there, Caleb encouraged as they approached a vertical shaft embedded in the wall. This should lead directly to level 4. The shaft was narrow, barely wide enough for an adult. A series of metal rungs disappeared into darkness below. I'll go first, Caleb said. Guide your steps after me, Mira. The girl nodded, face tight with concentration. Caleb lowered himself into the shaft, testing each rung before committing his weight. "It's stable," he called up. About 20 feet down, there's a horizontal passage. Mira followed with careful precision, using her cane to feel each rung before transferring her weight. Serenia came last, her movements labored, fresh blood seeping through her makeshift bandage with each descent. The shaft opened into a broader tunnel, dimly lit by emergency strips. Cool air flowed through it, a promising sign that it connected to areas outside the contamination zone. "This way," Caleb said, pointing ahead. "The airflow suggests an exit in that direction." They moved as quickly as Serenia's injury would allow, each step a battle against pain and time. The tunnel sloped gently downward, leading them deeper into the station's infrastructure. 4 minutes, Serenia reported, her voice growing weaker. The tunnel ended abruptly at a massive bulkhead door. A security terminal blinked beside it. Access only for security officers. "Can you override it?" Mira asked, sensing their hesitation. Caleb examined the terminal, then shook his head. "This is military grade. Beyond my skills." Serenia limped forward, studying the interface. "It's keyed to officer biometrics and code. If I authorize access, the door will open." She paused, reading the scrolling text on the terminal. "For me alone. The system would lock out civilians. The implications settled over them. If Serenia keyed her code, the door would open, allowing her escape. But it would reseal immediately after, trapping Caleb and Mira on the wrong side when the sterilization began." Mira pressed closer, cane clutched tight. Her lips trembled as she faced Serenia, dark glasses reflecting the terminal's glow. "Don't leave me." 3 words fragile as glass. Serenia froze. Duty screamed in her mind. Abandon them, follow protocol, survive. Self-preservation was ingrained in her training, reinforced by years of service in a system that valued order above all. Her thigh burned where shrapnel had torn flesh. Her lungs ached from the toxic air they'd navigated. By any rational calculation, her survival served the greater good, an officer preserved to continue serving the station. Caleb met her eyes across the dim space. He said nothing, made no plea or demand. Instead, he turned his own rifle, which he had retrieved from her when she struggled on the ladder. He pressed it into her hands, butt first. Her blood stained the grip where she had clutched it earlier. A silent transfer. A plea. A trust that pierced deeper than words. 3 minutes until sterilization, the automated voice announced. All personnel evacuate immediately. Serenia's finger hovered over the terminal's authentication scanner. The choice before her was brutally simple. Who would live and who would die? In the distance, they could hear the hiss of gas beginning to flood the sectors they'd fled. The slow march of death was coming for them. Behind her, Mira gripped the alloy cane, once a symbol of broken dignity, then a gift of kindness, now bound with the blood of the very officer who might condemn them. The girl's face was turned upward, as if she could see through her blindness to the heart of Serenia's struggle. 60 seconds. The alarm roared through the passage. Sterilization commencing in 60 seconds. Serenia looked from the terminal to the 2 faces before her. Caleb, steady and resigned. Mira, blind yet somehow seeing through to her core. In that moment, the weight of her uniform felt unbearable. The protocols that had guided her life suddenly hollow. She placed her palm on the panel. The green light blinked. Officer authorized. Mira's shoulders slumped, defeat washing over her features. She believed Serenia had chosen herself, but Serenia wasn't finished. She exhaled and pressed again. Her fingers danced across the interface, entering a sequence of override commands. Override, authorize all. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the terminal flashed once, twice. Emergency override accepted. Quarantine protocol suspended. The massive door shuddered open with the groan of rarely used mechanisms. Beyond it lay a secondary access corridor, dimly lit but free of smoke. "Go," Serenia ordered. Mira stumbled through first, cane tapping on metal as she navigated the threshold. Caleb moved to follow, then turned back for Serenia, who leaned heavily against the wall, her strength nearly spent. "Together," he insisted, slipping an arm around her waist. Behind them, the countdown continued. 30 seconds to sterilization. They half ran, half staggered through the corridor, Serenia's blood marking their path in sporadic drops. The passage curved upward, leading them toward what had to be an outer section of the station. "Almost there," Caleb encouraged as Serenya's steps faltered. A final door appeared ahead, its panel glowing green. Unlocked. They burst through it just as alarms shrieked behind them. The door sealed automatically, locking away the deadly gas now flooding the passages they'd fled. They collapsed on what appeared to be an evacuation platform, a wide area designed for emergency mustering. Around them, a crowd had gathered. Mechanics, officers, citizens evacuated from adjacent sectors, all silent witnesses to their dramatic emergence. Word had spread throughout the station. The lockdown, the emergency, the system override, all unprecedented events that had drawn attention from every level of the hierarchy. Screens displayed security feeds of their journey, captured by drones and cameras that had tracked their desperate flight. Serenya lay on her back, breathing heavily, her leg throbbing with each heartbeat. Caleb knelt beside her, checking her wound with gentle hands. Mira stood nearby, her posture uncertain in this new, unknown space filled with strangers. A security officer pushed through the crowd, weapon raised. "Lieutenant Serenya?" he asked, confusion evident in his voice. "We received alerts of unauthorized override codes." Serenya struggled to sit up, her uniform torn and bloodied, her authority in tatters. "I take full responsibility," she began, but before she could continue, Mira stepped forward. The blind girl raised her new cane, her small hand white-knuckled around the alloy shaft. The crowd tensed, uncertain what to expect from this strange child emerging from a sealed contamination zone. The room fell silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on the blind girl holding what had once been a mechanic's tool, then a makeshift cane, and now something more, a symbol wrapped in the bloody cloth of an officer's sacrifice. Her voice cut through the hush. 3 words that rippled through the gathered witnesses. "Your tools heal." Simple words, yet in the context of the station's rigid hierarchy, revolutionary. Tools were meant for order, for control, for maintaining the system. Healing was secondary, an afterthought in the machinery of power. A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone whispered the words again. Others shifted uncomfortably, while others leaned forward with sudden interest. A mechanic in the back dropped a wrench, the clatter echoing in the sudden stillness. A security officer's hand drifted from his weapon. "Your tools heal," another voice repeated louder this time. Then from somewhere in the back, "For the orphan girl." The ripple of those words spread outward, gathering force. People of all ranks exchanged glances, some confused, some awakened, some afraid. The blind girl's declaration had shattered something fundamental in the station's carefully maintained order. Serenya, mud-streaked, blood down her thigh, pushed herself upright. Using the wall for support, she sank to one knee before Mira and Caleb. In full view of her subordinates and peers, she pressed the rifle back into Caleb's hands. The gesture was unmistakable, a transfer of authority, a recognition that strength came in forms beyond weapons and uniforms. Her voice broke as she bowed her head before him. "Your order, Commander." The crowd collectively gasped. Officers in spotless uniforms stiffened in shock. Maintenance workers and refugees exchanged stunned glances. In the station's rigid hierarchy, such a gesture from an officer to a mechanic was unthinkable. A young cadet at the edge of the crowd, one who might have been among those who broke Mira's original cane, slowly removed his cap. The action spread, rippling through the uniformed personnel like a wave. Caleb accepted the rifle with visible surprise. For a moment, he seemed at a loss. Then his expression cleared, resolve replacing confusion. He turned to address the gathered personnel, his voice carrying with newfound authority. "Sector C is compromised. We need medical teams for the injured, engineering units to stabilize the environmental systems, and a full evacuation of adjacent sectors until structural integrity is confirmed." To everyone's amazement, people began moving immediately, responding to his commands as if he wore an officer's insignia instead of a mechanic's coveralls. Security personnel coordinated with maintenance crews without the usual friction. Medics rushed forward, including to Serenya, who waved them towards civilians first despite her own injury. "Lieutenant," Caleb said quietly, extending his hand to help her rise. "We need your expertise." She accepted his help, standing unsteadily. "I violated every protocol," she said, low enough that only he could hear. "They'll court-martial me when this is over." "Maybe," he acknowledged, "or maybe they'll see what I see, that sometimes the system needs to bend to preserve what matters most." Mira moved closer to them, her cane finding its way through the chaotic evacuation platform. People stepped aside for her now, some with reverence, others with uncertainty about what had just changed in their world. "What happens now?" she asked, her earlier confidence giving way to the uncertainty of a child in an adult world. Caleb and Serenia exchanged glances. The question extended beyond their immediate crisis to the larger implications of what had transpired. The boundaries crossed, the hierarchies challenged, the alliances formed. "Now," Serenia said, placing her hand on Mira's shoulder, "we rebuild. Differently." A station-wide announcement cut through the moment. "Attention all personnel. Containment breach in Sector C has been stabilized. Emergency protocols remain in effect. All civilians report to designated safe zones." But the crowd around them didn't disperse. Instead, they watched and waited, sensing that something fundamental had shifted. The blind girl with her alloy cane, the mechanic holding an officer's rifle, and the blue-skinned lieutenant with her hand on the child's shoulder, they formed a tableau that defied the station's established order. Mira's cane gleamed under the emergency lights, the bright alloy wrapped with Serenia's bloodstained cloth. What had begun as a tool, transformed into a gift of kindness, and then bound with sacrifice, now stood as something else entirely, a standard around which unspoken change gathered. A maintenance worker stepped forward, his uniform matching Caleb's division. "We have room in Section 8, he said, his voice carrying in the unexpected quiet. "For the girl. For anyone who needs it." A ripple moved through the assembled crowd. A medical technician raised her hand. "I can set up an auxiliary treatment center. For anyone without access codes." "I have extra rations," called another voice. One by one, other refugees emerged from hiding places, sensing a momentary safety in this unprecedented breakdown of barriers. Station workers nodded to them, some even offering water or ration bars. The shared trauma had created a temporary community where none had existed before. A security officer, one of Serenia's subordinates, stepped forward. He hesitated, then unclipped his access badge and handed it to Caleb. "The North Quadrant passageways," he said quietly. "They're clear." The gesture was small but profound. Access badges weren't merely tools. They were symbols of the station's rigid hierarchy, determining who could go where, who could live, who could survive. Freely giving one away was unthinkable mere hours before. "Your tools heal," someone repeated, the words spreading like a current through the gathering. "For the orphan," echoed another voice. Mira stood taller, her cane planted firmly before her. Despite her blindness, or perhaps because of it, she seemed to sense the moment's significance. She raised the cane slightly higher, like a banner or a beacon, her small frame somehow filling the space around her. Across the platform, a command-level officer watched the scene unfold with narrowed eyes. His uniform bore the insignia of Station Security Command. Without a word, he turned and strode toward the main administrative sector, his face unreadable. "They'll try to make this go away," Serenia murmured, her voice low enough that only Caleb could hear. "Once the emergency passes, they'll re-establish order." "Maybe," Caleb acknowledged. "Or maybe something has already changed." He looked at Mira, still standing with her cane raised, her face lifted toward a future she couldn't see but could perhaps sense coming. "Sometimes it only takes a small crack to bring down a wall." Serenia followed his gaze, something new softening her features. Respect, perhaps, or something deeper. "I've enforced their rules for years," she said. "Never questioned why some live in luxury while others hide in vents. Never asked why a child's life matters less than a protocol." "And now?" Caleb asked. A thin smile touched Serenia's lips. "Now I'm guilty of 16 separate violations of station code, and I'd commit every single one again." The medical team finally reached them, insisting on treating Serenia's wound properly. As they helped her onto a stretcher, she reached out suddenly, grasping Caleb's wrist. "Whatever comes," she said, her eyes intense, "remember this moment. Remember what happened when we chose differently." The ripples of change had only just begun to spread. Whether they would grow into waves or be suppressed remained to be seen. But for this moment, in this section of the vast station, people of all ranks stood together, united by crisis and the simple revolutionary idea. Your tools heal. As emergency teams swarmed around them, as order gradually reasserted itself from chaos, three unlikely allies stood together in the eye of the storm they had created. A blind girl with a makeshift cane, a mechanic with a security rifle, and an officer who had chosen compassion over protocol. The station would never be the same, and neither would they.